Welcome to this next unit in your CERT basic training course. We're going to talk about CERT organization. And as always, we begin with our instruction with this slide, which is the reinforcement of a couple of concepts that are fundamental to all of us as CERT volunteers. So personal safety is always the #1 priority for anything we do within CERT. We wear our appropriate personal protective equipment. We carry water. We have at least one communication device. We work as a team. We never go off on our own and decide we're going to do something on our own. We utilize the tools that we have, maintaining situational awareness and formally sizing up a situation to decide how we're going to operate. And of course, the bottom line is we always strive to do the greatest good for the greatest number. So in this unit, we will be talking about the incident management system, which is a structure for organizing people and activities. We will understand how CERT members fit into the larger picture when there is an emergency response that involves professional emergency responders. You'll learn the 9-step size-up process, which is a CERT process for thinking about what we should do, and it is valuable, and you'll hear it again in a number of units as we go forward. And we'll talk about the importance of documenting whatever it is that we do. It's important to understand about the incident command system and CERT organization, because if you think about it, you have a group of volunteers who come together spontaneously because there is a disaster. We are registered, we are trained, but now in this moment, who's going to do what? Who is in charge? What should we do? Where should we do it? All these questions surface. So the incident management system you're going to see is a very simple, tried and true way to ensure that we quickly get through how all of that will happen. And this is a system that's used up and down for all professional emergency response organizations in the United States. So it is, we need to fit in and click in to how this system operates. And we want you to be sure and understand common, first of all, the incident command, the incident management system is used, as I said, nationally by professional first responders. It is a way of being planful. Everybody has a role. Everybody knows what their role is. They know who they report to. And that ensures safety of disaster workers. It makes sure that we all are comfortable and capable of performing to our greatest capabilities. We know exactly who is in charge. We know exactly who is responsible for what. And of course, that improves the effectiveness of what we do. When we first think about the objectives of a CERT organization, the first things that come to mind are, what is the problem that brought us together? Why were we activated? Why are we here? What can we do within our scope and our capability to help? And who is going to do what? And then making sure that we always write down what it is that we're doing. If we didn't write it down, it didn't happen. Others can't follow the trail of what we were doing, why we did it, who was impacted. So we're going to make the argument to you that documentation is critical to all of the things that we do. So incident command system provides us with a well-defined management structure. As I said, it helps us to move through so that there is not chaos. We will always know that one person to whom we report to, who is telling us what should be done, what the next steps are. It affords a manageable span of control. That means that the number of volunteers to the supervisor is maintained in an effective way, with the desire of having no more than 3 to 7 volunteers to one supervisor. We use common terminology so that we have a shared understanding of what we're working on and what we're dealing with. It relies, as everything we do, on effective communication, whether it's among our teams or between us and professional first responders. It allows for consolidated action plans. So you don't have some people doing one thing and others doing another. And it allows for resource management that's effective. So people have what they need in order to do their job effectively. And of course, it allows for very clear accountability. So building on that, some key concepts of the incident command system is unity of command, which means that each CERT reports just to one person. We use common terminology. We're using the same organizational structure as our superiors, the professional first responders. We have that manageable span of control. And this gives us a lot of flexibility. So we fill positions as they're needed, as dictated by the nature of the incident. And our use of people can be modular. So to underscore that span of control, we really want teams to be between the 3 and 7 range so that it's effective for a manager to keep track of what people are doing. And we want to make sure that if we can, it's optimal to have 5 people on a team. Now, the incident command system, the incident command system, part of the incident management system, includes 5 major areas of responsibility. So there's command, which is, who's in charge, leadership. There's operations, which is the people on the ground who are actually doing rescue work. There's planning and intelligence, the people that are maintaining order, and people who are gathering information on what's going on in the situation and planning what we should be doing next. There's logistics, the people that are provisioning us, and there's finance and administration. Typically, finance and administration are typically not part of a CERT organization, but administration to some degree is, as I will talk to you about documentation. So in general, your professional first responders are organized this way. There is one incident commander. There are a variety of other chiefs that report to them. In the yellow boxes, you see the operations chief, the planning and intelligence section chief, the logistics chief, and that finance and administration that I spoke about. But there are some additional officers that report directly to the leader. These are critical officers that help to make the process work. So there's the public information officer. So that person who is responsible for fielding questions from the public and the media and composing what it is that needs to be said when to the public or through media. There is the liaison officer. That is the person who connects the incident organization to additional outside services, whether that's other responder groups, whether that's private sector groups that have resources that can fill needs, liaison with other municipalities that can come in and help. And then a very important role is a safety officer. That safety is the responsibility of everybody in the incident command structure, but the safety officer is somebody who's specifically devoted to thinking about what are the safety elements associated with the operation that we're undertaking and making sure that every day every team has an underscore of things they should be mindful for in order to make sure that safety continues to be our #1 priority. And the thing that's great about the incident command structure is that it's scalable. So you can think about it as when we are first activated as CERTs and we come upon a scene, it starts with one person. That person takes the lead, tries to understand what's going on. And as others begin to arrive with information, with capabilities, with skills, then that first person arriving on the scene, the incident commander, can then scale up the organization to meet the needs of the disaster within our capability. So this is just an example of how it can go from a very small organization to very large. This is just another visual example. Starts with very simple tasks, whatever we can do with the first boots that arrive on the ground, and then can expand depending upon what's needed and become a very complex response depending upon the number of agencies that are involved. You've seen in large California wildfires in recent years, if you've ever turned into the broadcast incident command, you will see there's CONFIRE, there's CAL FIRE, there's a weather service. There are the military is sometimes involved to provide backup. There are cities and towns and affected groups. So it can become very complex over time and depending upon the nature of the situation. So CERT uses that incident command system in a simpler way. So we also have, depending upon the incident, build up operations or planning, logistics, typically not finance and administration, but it is possible depending upon the nature of the situation. CERT in my municipality, in the city of Walnut Creek, never gets involved in any public information. So staffing this role could simply be making sure that there is somebody who refers the media who might come forward to the professional personal information officer who is responsible for the scene. And of course, that safety officer, that extra set of eyes, and that extra set of person who is planning what needs to be done to keep individuals safe. Okay, so command and control. The incident commander, what we refer to as the CERT team leader. So we're differentiating ourselves from the professional first responders who call their leader the incident commander. That's the person who thinks through what we should do, what's the nature of the situation, and what is it that we are able to do. The operations section is how we're going to do it. What will our response be? What skills need to be brought to bear within the CERT suite of skills and training? Planning intelligence is what's happening right now, what should we be doing next, always looking ahead. And that's the entity that gathers information, everything from who's showed up to what they are doing and where. The logistics section, which is how everything gets supported from a physical capability perspective, and then administration, which is often part of the planning section on what documentation are we compiling, how are we keeping track of what we are doing. So let's talk about that CERT team leader. So the CERT team leader is that first person generally who shows up on the scene. So you are activated according to your city's requirements. You show up, there's nobody else there. You think through, well, other people are going to be coming. What are the first things that we need to do? And one of the first things you might say to yourself is, this is our normal staging process, location. This is our command post. Is it safe for us to operate here? Is this the right place for us to be? Do we need to be closer to an incident if a specific area of need is already known? So one of the first things they do is try and determine whether or not everyone should gather in that location. And that one person may do a variety of things to perform all of the functions while they're waiting for others to come along. They can transfer their leadership to someone else when a more qualified person arrives, and that CERT leader is responsible for pointing as need arises and as staffing comes forward, may appoint all those other section leaders that we talked about. So the CERT team leader, the incident commander, reports up through to the next level of professional first responders. that person has responsibility. Our CERT team leader has responsibility for everything that we're going to do. They set the objectives and the priorities. They work with the other section leaders and identify, though, are ultimately responsible for identifying what we're going to work on and in what priority. They assign those key personnel roles. They make sure that we're coordinating amongst ourselves and that that the CERT team leader is the person who communicates directly to the professional first responders who come along and want to give us direction or want to know what it is we have been doing. Safety officer is an important role, and it's an important first role because in the heat of something going on, we're not professional first responders. So having somebody who has our number one priority in mind, a second person, is a really valuable thing to do. It's a calmer second set of eyes onto what we're doing. So as I mentioned, the CERT team, the safety officer looks at what we're going to be working on and recommends things that should be communicated to CERTs to make sure that they are safe. So, for example, if rainy weather is occurring or is anticipated, making sure that CERTs arrive with the right equipment, and if they don't have the right equipment, that they go back and get the right equipment, making sure their personal protective equipment is in place, making sure that they understand the hazards. If it's a rainy situation, taking greater care with where they walk, how they drive, whatever it is. And that, importantly, giving everybody at the beginning of each operational period, each period of time where new workers come in, those same instructions to make sure that everyone's safe. And of course, with any safety operation, it is critical that the safety officer, excuse me, can halt anything that's going on at any time if they are concerned that safety is being compromised. The public information officer, as I said, generally is not often staffed in a CERT situation, except for that would be a person who could, if the media showed up at the CERT location, or if the public was gathering in large numbers, that person could tell people where they could go to get timely and accurate information about the situation. So again, we don't talk to the media, but we do refer people to the right people in the professional first responder cadre to provide public information. The operations section is often the first section that gets built up after safety in a command post, and that's because these are the doers. These are the people who would, if a search response was something that was appropriate to the disaster and to our capabilities, the operations section would encompass those search team people. If medical operations were needed, if traffic needed to be directed, operations is where that is all managed. And the operations section can look like this. You can divide, depending upon the scope, the size of the response, you can build it up in its own organizational structure to keep that section orderly according to the work that people are doing. Planning intelligence is really important. In a larger professional first responder organization, the intelligence section is generally the law-keeping element of command, the people who are keeping the public safe, who are making sure that laws are enforced. In CERT, that's not something that we're doing. Instead, we're focusing on the gathering of intelligence and planning. So the planning section are the people who are receiving information about what it is that teams are doing and maintaining a total picture of what's going on. They keep an accurate representation of who has checked in, who's working on a scene, what equipment is being used. They understand what's the weather situation, You know, what are the possibilities of what might emerge in this broader situation? They might be checking into verified social media to understand, to help the team to understand what the broader organization sees or is dealing with. And they're keeping eyes on what might happen next. So helping the CERT team leader and the operations chief and others to think forward. Yes, we're working on this right now, but here's what might be coming next. The logistics section is the section that generally manages everything that's needed in order to make possible a response. So it might be when you're activated by your city that it's the logistics section of the city's emergency operations center that calls up CERTs and activates them, asks them to come help. So personnel management that keep tracking of who's responded and who needs breaks, that kind of thing, that is managed with logistics. They bring in provisions, food, communications, supplies, and people to make sure we are keeping contact with the outside world and with our professional first responders. They might come up with alternative locations and facilities. They might be responsible for transportation. So everything that makes it possible for us to operate is handled in logistics. As I said, finance and administration. What is important for us as CERTs is to document absolutely everything. And our records are used by our municipality to account for the time and the cost in responding to a disaster. You know that the federal government will match to support a community to help with the costs of an emergency response and to help in our recovery. And volunteer time has quite a significant value. Back in 2020, it was $33.61 an hour. It's probably gone up since then in California, but a municipality has to demonstrate that it has paid for a portion of its own costs related to a disaster or recovery, but volunteer hours can be used as part of establishing the cost that the municipality has already incurred. And then, of course, documentation is critical. At the end of an incident, there's a lot of analysis that needs to go on. What happened? What could have happened? What should happen in the future? Documentation provides a roadmap to how we operated during a disaster. Okay, and let me just underscore this, as I said, as CERTs, we do not talk to the media. And it's important that we make sure that we don't let the media interfere with what it is that we are doing. You know, we follow very strict safety protocols. The media doesn't. You don't want a situation where the media is getting close, that they are impeding CERT progress in what we're supposed to be doing, that they're distracting what we need to work on. And of course, we never want to give anybody outside of CERT, other than our professional sponsors, any sensitive information, any inflammatory information, nothing. So we just don't deal with the media as CERTs at all. So this National Incident Management System that I just talked about is part of a larger system called NIMS that was created in order to allow a variety of responding organizations to work effectively together. So if you ever want to, as you move through CERT and you become more experienced, if you ever want to become a CERT leader, you're going to want to take IS 100, an introduction to the incident command system, or IS 700, which is a introduction to the National Incident Management System. These are really good courses. They're not very long. They're free. They're online. And they give you a broader sense of how we fit into the bigger picture. Okay, let's talk about mobilization. So when an incident happens and when we have been activated, however that happens for our municipality, then CERTs, the first thing we do is we make sure that we take care of ourselves, that our family is okay, that our home is okay. We check on our neighbors. And then if we feel we are capable, we will follow whatever the activation request is from our sponsoring organization. We'll get ready to respond and to work together effectively. And we'll put in place those, once we gather those incident command system elements that I just spoke about, with the intent of doing the greatest good without harming any CERTs. In the city of Walnut Creek, we have a very specific activation protocol, and how the city decides if and when they're going to activate us. The first thing they do is they send us an alert, and that might be an email, a text, a phone message, and it tells us, get ready, we may need your help. Don't show up yet. We just want to put you on notice, get your things ready, and we just want you to know it's possible we'll need your help. That might happen first, or they might, depending upon the nature of the disaster, they might mobilize us, give us full mobilization right away. They might say, gather your things and show up at your designated staging area, your command post, or they might already know where the incident needs support and might tell us to report to an alternate designated location. So that second level of alert is, hey, we know we need you, please come. And then there's, in Walnut Creek, a third level of support request, and that is this. We never self-activate. We never decide, oh, there's an emergency, I'm going to go help. I'm going to put on my CERT gear and I'm going to step in and operate as a CERT. We never do that. But if there is an earthquake with very strong shaking for 20 seconds or more, that is a very large earthquake, then we are pre-authorized to go to our command posts and begin to assemble, to assess damage, and to determine if there's something within our capability that we can help with. The city of Walnut Creek is divided into 8 neighborhood areas for CERT purposes. The little blue squares represent the general location of our command posts. And as you graduate from CERT, we'll be providing you with the specific addresses for these command post locations. But when we are activated, unless we are specifically asked to go somewhere else, we assemble at our CERT command post for our designated area. And of course, once we arrive at our CERT location, we're going to put in place those processes we talked about. The first person to arrive will be the CERT team leader, and that person will decide what we're going to do. They'll determine, based on information as we're coming into the command post, what they're finding out. That'll begin to suggest areas of priority, what we should be looking at first, what is in our capability. One of the first things they're gonna do is make sure that communications get set up so that we have communications with the outside world. And in Walnut Creek, that means ham radio communications. And they're certainly gonna implement everything utilizing the incident command system, perhaps first identifying a safety officer for assistance and also an operations chief to start mobilizing people to do what it is we can within our capability and training to help the situation. So how is it that we think through what we should be doing? And again, if you think about a group of people who maybe are meeting for the first time, or who don't have a lot of familiarity with one another, how are we going to decide what is important to do? Well, that's CERT team leader. And those who gather and are appointed in leadership positions are going to invoke what is called the CERT on-scene size-up. And this process, this 9-step process, you're going to learn in a variety of units as we go forward, because it is universally used in order to think through what we should be doing, how we should do it, and how it's going once we've implemented it. It's a continuous process. So those steps, some people will say, oh my gosh, 9 steps, it's a disaster. We have to rush in and do something. No, these steps, while you may think, gee, that's a lot of steps. If you think about it, any big decision that you make in your life, you go through this process. So all we're doing here is ensuring that we're using the best thoughts to decide what we should be doing, that we've thought about alternatives, that we're taking action in a planful way to ensure that everybody is as safe as can be, that's our first priority. So those steps are gathering the facts, what's going on, what's the situation, why are we here, what are the current elements, is it 5 o'clock rush hour, is it pouring rain, what are the situation, what's the situation that we find ourselves in. Second step is assessing and communicating damage. So as CERTs, if we've been activated, we're all observing what is happening in our neighborhoods on our way to our command post, so that when we get there, we can communicate to the CERT team leader and to others that are there what we have seen and damage we have assessed. The third step is consider probabilities. So if we took a particular action, what might be coming next? What might happen next? And assessing our own situation. Who's here? Who has who was trained the most recently? Who has refreshed their training? Who served in some of these roles before? Do we have the capability to mount a response? And what type of response can we mount? For example, if we have a lot of ham radio operators who show up first, do we have the ability to assess and communicate? Maybe that's the thing that is the most important thing for us to do, rather than moving into damaged areas immediately because we don't have enough people. So assessing what our capabilities are and what the situation is critical. Then from all of those things that we know, establishing our priorities. What is it we're going to do first? What do we have the capability to do effectively? And then making a decision. Of all those priorities, let's work on this first. We have enough people to do this. They have the capability to do this. Let's make a decision about what we're going to do and how we're going to proceed. So creating a plan of action. So first, we're going to send the search team out, and we're going to ask that team to communicate when they arrive at the situation that we think needs to be addressed. They're going to give us information. They're going to report back. We're going to communicate and document this and let first responders know what's going on. Whatever that plan of action is, making sure everybody understands what comes next. Then, of course, taking the actual action that we've decided that we were going to take, and then evaluating our progress throughout the action, continuously sizing up. Have conditions changed? Is what we're doing effective? Can we move on to something else, or do we need to bring more resources to bear? So constantly evaluating what's going on. So seems like it's 9 specific steps. It's because you have to be planful when you're thinking about the safety of other human beings. Okay, and I mentioned before that documentation is absolutely critical. So we need to document what's going on so that the CERT team leader always knows what's going on. If you think about it, as a situation becomes more complex, there are more people involved, more boots on the ground, that CERT team leader, it's going to be harder for them to keep track. So documentation provides that capability. and allows them to know what's going on at any given moment. It allows them a resource so that when professional first responders arrive, as I mentioned, it's the CERT team leader who communicates with them. So that person can pick up the paperwork and hand it to them, can show them, we're working on these 3 things. We've already done these 4 things. These are situations over here that are outside of our control or our capability or training. So making sure that documentation makes sure the CERT team leader knows what they're doing, lets professional first responders know what we have been doing, and of course it documents what we did when the situation is over. Okay, so documentation can come in a variety of forms, and I will tell you in advance that there are a variety of established incident command system forms that professional first responders use all of the time. As CERTs, we might be using just a select number of those forms to document what we are doing. And in fact, some municipalities have some discrete forms that they've created that help people to make sure they're documenting everything in a comprehensive way. So in minimum, though, if there are no forms in front of you, we always want you to have in your CERT bag blank paper and pen and write down everything you see, what you're doing, and what you think needs to be done, so that that can all be contributed at the command post and provide information. It's important also to document if sub-organizations or sub-areas are set up next as part of our command post. So it's not just what's going on in the incident status, but also if we set up a staging area so that we can receive supplies or enlist the help of additional volunteers, or keep the public who are inquiring in an orderly way. So where that support location is and how it's being managed, whether we set up a medical station for emergency operations, or even if there is a morgue, all of that needs to be documented, and the activities that take place in those areas have to be documented. So if you think about it, the most logical things that you're going to document, and the CERT forms that are most often used, is some sort of damage assessment form. So in Walnut Creek, we use an initial damage assessment form. It's called a windshield survey form. So that's our way, as we're walking to our command post or driving to our command post, we can keep track of what we see along the way. Then whatever we do as CERTs, whenever we gather, we always sign in and sign out so that our presence is known and our safety can be maintained. That's done on an ICS 211 form. We also keep track of what incidents we're working on an ICS 204. The CERT leadership keeps a briefing assignment so that at any given moment, anybody can look at it and see what it is that we're working on and have worked on. In any kind of a medical operations area, they're keeping very clear records of who it is they are treating, what it is that they are doing. That happens in the pets area as well, because as you know, if you're evacuated and you want to take your companion pet, you have a right to do so, but we may have to document holding pets in a separate area, not in the medical area. So pets, we keep track of that with separate forms. There's a communications activity log, so all of the information that's coming in or is being disseminated out, as well as there's another log that maintains what frequencies we use on our ham radios. There's a form for that. That's the ICS 205. There is an equipment inventory form, and of course there is this general message form that's really almost looks like a blank piece of paper with a to and a from and the time and the date and the location, and then you can put in any kind of message that you have that needs to be conveyed to somebody. So in Walnut Creek, this is a look of the windshield survey form. You can print this off from our website and keep it in your CERT bag so that when you're arriving, you can indicate, I'm in the Heather Farm area. I walked to my command post from my home, close to the Countrywood Shopping Center and along the Contra Costa Canal Trail to our command post. I'm a ham radio operator, so I was listening in, monitoring in the CERT repeater. And along the way, my spouse is a CERT, so that person was with me, and these are the findings of what we saw. And when we came to Shepherd Drive, before we entered the canal trail, we saw a home that had a front porch that was leaning. We saw a couple of dogs that seemed to be running around urgently. Whatever it is that we see, that we're gonna document that. And of course, if we see something major, like a major life-threatening problem, a gas leak, a spreading fire, there's an explosion, if there's a mass casualty event, we're going to document that and communicate that as quickly as possible. And also in CERT, we utilize in Walnut Creek something called the Field Team Message Form. You'll learn more about this in subsequent classes, but the point of it is, if a search and rescue team is sent out, this form gives them a logical, formal way to document what it is they're finding, what the condition of victims are, whether they are triaged red, yellow, green, if there are any animals that we come across or that we have had to help. And you're going to learn about triage in your MedOps section, a future unit. All the information related to victims is written down. Any kinds of specific hazards that we see is written down. Structural damage, anything we need. We are a team. We've been out for a while. We need a couple of team members to give breaks to our people, or we need water. And then our team status and where we're planning to go. So you'll find that we radio this in to our CERT command post, and we tell them, this is who's speaking, and I want to tell you about this section of victims that we came across, or other kinds of hazards, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be, we don't fill out the entire form. It's what we find that's relevant. We're given a message number that confirms and helps us to keep track that we have already communicated this information. And then we move along and we complete one of these forms for every situation that we come across and that we take action on. Other forms, there's that ICS check-in form. You probably have already used that by now to get into class. You always check in and check out so that we don't have to go and find you in an emergency. The ICS 214 personnel form is used to document everything that you do, to keep track of about the time that you did it and what you did. This is helpful both for us knowing what you did and how you contributed to a situation, the work that you were doing, but it also helps afterwards to keep track of what it was that CERT was doing in general. So let me take questions now and see what questions you have about this unit. And then when we're done with questions, I just want you to remember, again, a group of people showing up all at one time, the incident command system provides a beautifully simple way for people to click in, to know what it is they need to do, who they need to take charge of, how many people is effective for them to manage. And this system can flex up or flex down depending upon the situation and the resources that you have. And it allows for a very orderly, very safe way to manage a situation. And of course, everything you do, you need to document everything and make sure that you can say later what it was that you did. Thank you for joining this unit, and thank you for your participation in the Walnut Creek CERT program.